All right, Nick, let's talk about the Miami Hurricanes' huge win over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. You got to be excited about that. But that's not the only thing that the Hurricanes potentially have to be excited for. I think there's some really other great news on the horizon for this team. We'll get into that in just a second here. But first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick. And this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, some more great news on the horizon for this Hurricanes team after, again, can't say enough, huge victory over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Miami looked great out there. Everything coming in perspective for this team. But without further ado, let's get into the other good news for this Hurricanes team. And that's the none other than a potential flip of a big time 5-star defensive line recruit out of Florida coming away from Texas potentially to the Hurricanes. Let's get into this article and we can talk more about it on the other side. So this is from over on SI.com. It says, "Stay tuned. Those were the words that 5-star defensive lineman James Johnson told On3 Sports and Rivals when asked about his status as a Texas Longhorns commit after watching the Hurricanes beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on Sunday night at Hard Rock Stadium 27-24. And those words would mean good things for Mario Cristobal and his staff as they work to keep local elite talent from leaving South Florida for the Lone Star State. Johnson, who plays for Miami Northwestern, was one of the top tier recruits at the game on Sunday." So I think there's a lot to unpack here, a lot of really good news for Miami. And two things. First of all, Miami won in a really great fashion into that aspect. That's good news. You get the win that weekend over a really, really good Notre Dame opponent, and you got some top tier players for recruiting there to see that win. That's something special. Two, Texas lost, so that's another thing you can add into the equation here as well. But three, I think the way that Miami won, their defensive front was very, very dominant, very strong against the Fighting Irish. So I think having a guy that is a 5-star defensive lineman, seeing that performance at first game of the season against the number 6 ranked team in the country just shows, hey, this is a team where I want to go, where I want to be able to grow and show really strong defensive play. I think that's a key here. And this is something Miami's been working on for quite some time here. So I think this is really great news for the Hurricanes. I think this guy's definitely going to flip here within the coming week or so to the Hurricanes from the Texas Longhorns. But let's just go into what Miami was able to do against Notre Dame that I think is really going to be helpful for them to be able to flip guys like this. And we see here I have their defensive grades per PFF for the game versus Notre Dame. And you see the two highest grades for them: pass rush, run defense, 81.6 run defense grade, 82.1 pass rush grade. The defensive line, that front seven in general, was very dominant, had a really, really strong grade. And I think they won on the back of this defense in the way that you were able to come out here and play hard-nosed football and show people that this is a Miami team that as much time and effort and recruiting they put in to transform the defensive side of things, they were able to do it, keep this thing going forward. And I think that shows us next graph here just shows how they're able to do it. You see this rushing attack by Notre Dame, or lack thereof a rushing attack, 3.4 yards per carry average by Notre Dame versus the Hurricanes, showing how well they did up front. No one rushed for over 45 yards. I think that was the largest rusher here in Jadarian Price. It was a good defensive effort by the Hurricanes. So I think seeing all that, putting it in perspective, you have this guy, 5-star defensive lineman at the game. I think things are going in the right direction for the Hurricanes. This is a team that's on top. This is a team that's able to recruit very, very well. We've seen what they were able to do in the past, but having a performance like this, I think we're going to see this team just kind of flywheel effects, you springboard things into the future. This is the type of performance they needed, and now we're seeing the result of it. Potentially an absolutely massive flip for the Hurricanes here from the Texas Longhorns. Curious what your thoughts are on all of this, Nick. But before we get to you, Hurricanes fans, in the comment section below, there's a lot of answers here. We're talking about defensive line performance, talk about a potential massive defensive line flip here for the Hurricanes. So I'm going to ask you, who's your favorite Hurricanes defensive alignment of all time? There's some legendary names on this list. There's some legendary names, that been recently. There's some all-time guys from, the 90s, 2000s, 80s. There's so many names to pick from, but you got to pick one. Who's your favorite Miami defensive lineman of all time? Put it in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, enough for me. What are your thoughts on all of this for the Hurricanes?
I'm going to focus on the performance and the win over Notre Dame. And honestly, they won the game, but from everything that could have gone wrong for Miami, a lot of it did, right? You had questionable calls. You had a lot of bad calls that went against Miami. You had some defensive lapses in the fourth quarter. I mean, this was a Hurricanes team that was clearly better than Notre Dame. It wasn't even close. There was some questionable non-use of the injury timeout rule by the officials, which gave the Notre Dame gave Notre Dame a free timeout. Like, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened that was against Miami, and then in years past would have probably resulted in their loss, but they found a way to get a win and get it done. And I think that's a key part of this Hurricanes team. We talked about the last time we did a Miami story about how this week one performance would go a very long way in determining could they make the postseason. Because if you look at their schedule and you go down the stretch here, I mean, they have Florida and Florida State here on the docket left. And obviously, Florida State looked good against Alabama. We'll have to see how they actually are. Florida State's going to be one of those weird teams because they had so many transfers and so many new guys, kind of like Miami in some ways, where you don't know exactly they're going to look like when they get more film. But Florida State was just a total rehaul, whereas at least Miami at least has somewhat of the same guys in place. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. Florida State, 2 games in 2 weeks right there, from the September 20th for Florida and October 4th for Florida State. But outside of that, I mean, their schedule is very winnable. I don't want to hear about SMU being a top 25 team. I think they're fine, but they're not spectacular. But they're beating Notre Dame. They now got that quality win. They got it done. They got a top 10 win going down the rest of the schedule. I think they can go 9-2 the rest of the way and easily make the playoff, right? As opposed to last season. And I think this is a Hurricanes team. The acquisition of Carson Beck, I said, listen, it may take a few games to figure it out. It wasn't perfect from Beck, but he had a really good game. You look at the offense, defensive line, it was clearly a line of scrimmage domination from Miami. And I think that's one of the things that I think was a great sign for the future of this team. And one of the things that I think really just jumped out to me was that Miami played, I want to say, from an offensive perspective, very, very conservatively, certainly down the stretch, right? They almost gave Notre Dame the opportunity back into the game, right? Like I said a second ago, a lot of things went amazingly well for the Fighting Irish. And despite that, Miami still won. That is huge, right? They got that win in the docket. They overcame some challenges that would normally have led to some defeats in the past. Now we're seeing the recruiting news come in, right? And this is where the flywheel effect, the compounding, just good energy and good vibes starts going. Getting these ugly wins where you don't play your best game is always so really important for any top contender. Like any great pitcher in baseball, finding a way to get outs when you don't have your best stuff. Let's say your fastball slow that day, your curveball just isn't breaking, right? Whatever it is. And you just still find a way to get out. You get out of the inning, you strike guys out. You still find a way to get out of those holes, even though you don't have your best stuff. That's a big confidence boost because that way, when you do have your best stuff, you know you're going to be unstoppable. And this is a Miami team. I'm going to be totally honest. They look good, especially the line of scrimmage on defense, but otherwise, not their best stuff. Some lapses in coverage, right? Running game had some ups and downs. Beck was good for the most part, but he's a little inaccurate at times as well. A lot of questionable calls, but still some dumb penalties. So across the board, a lot of things for Miami to work on. I thought Notre Dame actually played on a scale of 1 to 100, about a 95 in terms of living up to their talent and expectation. I think Miami played at like an 80 or an 85, and Miami still came out on top. That's a great sign. Again, Cristobal and his program deserve a lot of credit for finding a way to get the job done. Obviously, we're seeing the recruiting news now pile in. A lot of energy, a lot of momentum going forward. They got Bethune-Cookman in South Florida. I obviously like their chances there before we go Florida State, and then it opens up the ACC schedule the rest of the way. I look at this Miami team. I think they're a favorite. Honestly, you can say it now, to be a national championship contender. And that's why I think you're going to see recruits. They notice this, right? They sit there and say, Notre Dame, obviously they had a new starting quarterback, but this was a team that, and we talked about the Fighting Irish all offseason, coming into the year, they had national championship aspirations, and they were a top contender. They were one of the best programs in the entire country. People were sleeping on them a little bit just because it just so happens to happen sometimes with Notre Dame because they're not in a conference. They get a sort of different kind of media attention. They get put off to the side, but they were a legitimate and still are a legitimate national title contender, and Miami beat them on a semi-off night. That's a great sign for Miami. You better believe recruits notice that. They're like, hey, listen, this Hurricanes team's legit. They can play a little off and still beat some of the best programs in the country. That's where I want to go. So we're going to see momentum. We're going to see, I think, more recruiting news go for the Hurricanes. I think right now, Cristobal, Carson Beck, this entire squad, we got two big matchups, in-state rivalries right around the corner, but clearing this first hurdle and the way they did it was so impactful, not just for the prospects this season, but for their future in terms of recruiting as well. Phenomenal job. Again, an emotional victory, a great win for Miami, and I think will have a long-ranging impact for this program for weeks, months, and potentially even years to come.
Yeah, Nick, and I think again what you brought up, really good points. And I think there's a lot to like about how Miami went out and played, even with a little bit of shortcomings on their part, still able to get the win done. And a few things to touch on. Carson Beck, he really didn't get to practice for with the team for most of this offseason. So I think there's a lot more room for him to grow. I just think
Yeah.
this Miami team is going to get better and better down the stretch, like you said after Florida State. This is a team that should, just rack up the wins going into being college football playoff contenders. And I just think overall, this flip for Miami, if they're able to get it, would be really big. Keeping guys from the state of Florida in the state of Florida, I think that's a really big win for this program. So overall, a lot of things to like about what's going on for Miami, but even more so, a lot of things to look forward to as far as this is a team that's just getting started. This was not their best performance. They were still able to get the big time win. And I think we're going to see this team improve more and more down the stretch, just get better and better. Really like what we're seeing here out of Miami.